My full name is James Mitchell. First I went in the Navy in 1942, about 30, less than a month after Pearl Harbor. I was plowing the field. I was behind the plow in the field plowing. And then somebody come out there and they said, you know, they just bombed Pearl Harbor? And I said, they did. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I guess I better get to the house and change clothes. I want to go.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
I asked my uncle. See, I had an uncle, aunt, and uncle raising us. I'm talking about I, myself, and two sisters. And I said, I think you can get along without me. And he said, well, I hate to see you go, son, but he was like a father to me. But I said, well, I'm going to go and maybe I can pick out the service, the branch of service I want to be in. And he said, go ahead. And so I less than 60 days, I was on my way to New Orleans to be sworn in. And I said, they move kind of fast around here, don't they? And he said, yeah, we move fast. While the Navy recruiter was interviewing me and talking about me and asking me questions, and he said, how tall are you? And I said, I don't know. You got anything to measure me with? And he said, yeah. So he took my measurement and then he weighed me and he said, hell, if you weighed less than, I said, if you'd have weighed less than 2 pounds more, I wouldn't have let you in. And I thought, I weighed 123 at that time. I was aboard a vessel, and that's a cargo vessel, and AKA, yeah, 64, I believe. And I made a couple of trips to. We went from the East Coast, some city in New Jersey, and we went all the way around through the Panama Canal and up the West Coast, and we went all the way to Point Barrow, Alaska. That's a most northern point at that time, and way up there. I was up on deck with the captain up there running radar gear, operator. Okay. And we got up there and we were dodging icebergs and all this stuff and that, and well, we didn't have any trouble getting up there. We had trouble unloading all the cargo.
They put you to work, didn't they?
Yeah. I'm glad I stayed in there. All the time I put in the service was good duty.
My name is Angel S. Martinez. Nickname is Kelly. I fought in World War II as a machine gunner. I served under the United States Army. I was with the 89th Infantry Division, the 333rd Regiment, 3rd Battalion. I grew up in New Mexico. I'm a Native American, Navajo. There were 10 of us in the family. Of course, I always forget myself, counting myself. Anyway, it was pretty rough in those days, I think we complain today about the situations, that are going on. But in those days, it was just, that would have been nothing really. Because we have just gone through the Depression, and my dad always brought that up. Couldn't hardly buy anything. But we had a farm, or he had a farm, my dad had a farm, and we had horses, we had cattle, we had chickens, and we had pigs. And that's real nice when you look at it that way. But I tell you what, it's a lot of work. Because you have to get up early. My dad would get up early and milk the cows. And I get up early with him, and I follow him with a cup. Because I used to like just drink the milk from the cup. But I consider life, when I look back, it was rough, but it was nice. Because some of the things that I learned through my dad and that type of life was some of the things that helped me during the war. I didn't really join the service. I was drafted. In those days, World War II, they had some people that joined, but most of us were drafted. And when you became 18, you were supposed to go to the local board and sign your name and just wait till they call you. And that's what they did in my case. We used to call it greetings. You get greetings from President Roosevelt. Yeah, they were desperate for people. Mm-hmm. I was 18 at the time. That was in 1944. Basic training was kind of rough. For me, it wasn't too rough, but I tell you what, there were some youngsters there that didn't go through some of the rough stuff that I did, in the farm. So, but it was rough. Boy, I'm telling you, some of the things that they did, I thought it was crazy stuff, but I learned later that they came in handy. Like running through the water and going under machine gun firing, and simulated this, simulated that. I have a lot, when it comes to simulating, See, in the farm, my dad had a shotgun, and every once in a while he would take me hunting. And one day he taught me how to fire the shotgun, and boy, he didn't tell me about the recoil on that thing, and it knocked me over. So I knew then I learned, We spent quite a bit of time in the range. I started learning the machine gun, and so I wound up being a machine gunner. But then at the meantime, the 17 weeks were over in Camp Robert. So after that, they gave me a delaying route. I came home for a while, and then after that, we went on a troop train, and we went up here in North Carolina. After we left Butler, North Carolina, we went to Boston, Massachusetts. And then from there, we boarded the ship and left for Europe. Before we arrived there, I used to get up on top of the ship there, and I could look every direction that I could see. It was too much going up and down, And let me tell you one thing, I was so sick I couldn't hardly eat. I felt like I had the flu all the time. So when we arrived in France, I was glad that we did it, because I was so sick in that ship. I'd never been on a ship before, and not for 13 days anyway. That's what it took us to get across. When we boarded the ship, I thought we were going to get a train or maybe a bus or maybe good transportation. They loaded up on trucks, and no canvas on top, and it was raining and cold. I tell you, it was miserable. But I was glad to get out because I was already sick anyway. By the time we start setting up the tent, morning came, and we slept whatever we could. And all of a sudden, here comes this plane and scraping us, It's the first Nazi plane that I have seen, and I was amazed because I didn't think that they would be doing that to us. And he went all around the post, just shooting here and there, and I couldn't do much because I didn't have the machine gun with me. But anyway, as the troops started arriving, I could see some tanks coming in now. And we felt more secure now because we were getting help. The tanks were coming in, and finally that pilot made a mistake, I guess, came over, and one of the tanks got him down. That's the first thing that I have ever seen in, real. So then I start thinking, I start realizing that this thing was real. So after that, we left that place, and it was, I think we went into Reims, France, and that's where we started fighting. That's when we really start seeing them. But before we got there, I could see we were walking through this farm and land, open field, and I could see a lot of dead animals, dead soldiers, Nazis, and also ourselves, a lot of things going on. Then I start thinking this is war, First thing that I was thinking, and some of the guys were having problem with it because when we were looking at it as shooting a human being, and I'm really going to tell you this because I tell you what, it's rough, You start thinking, well, there's humans like we are, but there's a war going on, and you know that if you don't get them, you're going to get you. And I was talking to some of the rifle people were coming over. And they said, well, I got me 3. I got me 2. And so they were counting what they got, And I said, my goodness, that's bad. They got human people. But anyway, that's the way it was. But after a while, you get used to it. You don't, especially when they kill one of your friends and you see your friend die, then you really get mad. And that, I guess, getting mad, it takes care of the rest of the stuff, because it did on me. We were in a small, appeared like a forest, like the black forest that you read about. And there was some area there that the trees were kind of cut down. And Lieutenant Reeser comes over and he says, you know what? He says, Marty, we're going to have to use our machine guns. I says, okay. So he says, why don't you go ahead and set up the machine gun in the crossroad and start, he gave me directions, where to fire and all of that. And I said, no problem. He says, I'll give you the signal in a little while, and as soon as the company start moving, because see, I was trained to fire overhead, firing over the troops, and when the rifle company advanced, or whoever was advancing, I would fire overhead, fire over them, so that I could keep the enemy pinned down, and then they would advance. So anyway, the order comes in to start firing, and in the meantime, Fee comes over to me, which one of my friends, from the other platoon that had the other machine gun. He's opened up his wallet and he showed me a picture of his wife and 2 daughters that he had. He says, this is my wife and 2 daughters. And I said, gosh, I says, you're married? Yeah, oh yeah. He says, are you? And we started the conversation there. At the meantime, Lieutenant Reeser says, well, go ahead and start firing, And he pulled out a little way from that, and on the grass was real tall. Well, when I started firing, I noticed the troops were advancing, and I noticed that that building up there was supposed to be a building, had a little door, and they opened the door, and it was a pillbox. I don't know if people remember the pillbox, but anyway, it was a building made out of concrete, especially for protection from firing, from small arm firing anyway. And that guy was firing at the troops, and man, I started firing, and I couldn't hit the little window, in the building, because the bullets kept bouncing. I could see the tracers hitting the side of the wall, but I couldn't see nothing penetrating the window. So I don't know how long that went, because it seemed like it was a long time. But anyway, at the meantime, one of the riflemen with a grenade, he fired the rifle grenade, and hit the window, and that was the end of that. I seen the smoke come up, and everything. Well, at the meantime, there we were being bombarded with artillery. Oh man, artillery, fire, and everything else. And once I started firing the machine gun, it smoked because it was a water-cooled machine gun. I knew that once that thing starts smoking like that, I would have to move. Because I learned that from the Germans themselves, because every time they fired the machine gun, they kept on moving. And I knew then why, because once you start firing that machine gun, it gave you away your position. So at the meantime, I noticed one round hit pretty close in the front of me, artillery. And then another round hit in the back. And then I don't even know how many rounds. And at the meantime, one of them got so close that shrapnel flew everywhere. And that concussion knocked my machine gun down. So I picked it up and the best way I could, again, you know, and I started firing again. And like I said, I don't know, I'm not, I couldn't give the details what actually happened, but it seemed like it went for a while. Anyway, I don't know how long it was, but I noticed the rifle company had advanced up to where they were supposed to go, and then I had to cease firing because I didn't want to kill them. So at the meantime, Lieutenant Reese says, we're going to pull back. So they assembled the machine gun and called for the help, and they came over and they picked up the rest of the weapon and we pulled back. And I said, wait a minute, where's Fee? And he said, Fee is probably here somewhere. Oh, he's probably goofing off somewhere, you know, somebody said that. I said, no, I guess he's here somewhere. So I started looking around and I found him. And when I found the body, I noticed that he had a piece of shrapnel that went through his back and came out to the front. And I know he bled to death. And I know that he got killed right away. So that's one of the consolations I had, that at least he died right away. And in those days, you know, we didn't have like today, you know, you see in the movies or in television or the news where the chopper comes over and picks up the dead. Well, in those days, we didn't have that. We didn't have that comfort, you know. If you got hit or wounded or something, you just either died there. If you were able to walk, you walked. Maybe 2 days later, you know, Captain Howell came over and he says, do you know where the dead are? I said, yes. He said, Marty, you're going to have to go with the medics and show them where the dead are so they can pick them up. I said, okay. I went, the medic came over with a Jeep. I took him where the area was. It must have been a little ways from where we were then, you know. We got close to the forest there. We could see a German, you know. We could see a German underneath the trees there. And he says, he's dead. I said, no. Carney was his name, the medic. I said, no, Carney, he's not dead. Look at his stomach. You could see that he was breathing from far. You know? He said, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I said, we're going to make him think there's a lot of us. And I learned that from the Germans too, you know. I said, we're going to make a lot of noise. We're going to make him think that we're a lot of us. And he's going to get up and he's going to get scared and he's going to surrender. Well, I was hoping that he would, because the medics didn't have a weapon and I had a carbine. And I didn't trust the carbine because I was used to the machine gun. So anyway, we made a lot of noise. We hollered in Spanish. I hollered in Spanish, English, German, whatever I could, made much noise as I could. And he did the same thing with the Jeep out there, banging whatever he could. And one of them came out. And then another one came out. And another one. Then 17 came out of that forest. And as they came out, one of them says, you're scared, you know. He told me in English, he said, you're scared. And I said, come and see here. You know, I brought him over to me and I said, where did you learn English? He says, he says, I'm a German soldier. He says, but I'm not a Nazi. He says, well, he's there. He says, we have a lot of weapons and we were going to hit you guys from behind. And we were just taking a break. He says, what are you going to do? I said, tell them that I want them all to line up here, and I made him make a line. And I said, I tell them that I need every one of them to drop the ammunition or weapons or whatever they have. And if I see anybody, or later on I catch anybody with weapons or anything, I says, I'm just going to take them over here and kill him. I says, I'm not going to put up with it. So he says, so he told him in German, and let me tell you, they had enough ammunition and weapons to get us from behind. And if they would have gotten it, well, you know, I wouldn't be telling you the story. Anyway, so after we captured them, we searched them, and we called the military police, and they came over and picked them up. And at the meantime, we had to go pick up the dead now. I went over and told the medic where the feed was at. And the truck came over because they had a 6x6 truck, and they had a canvas. And the canvas, the reason that I'm saying that is because with the canvas, I couldn't see nothing there except the truck. So they got over and picked up Fee, my friend, and they threw him in there. And they threw him in there, you just heard the hat hit one of the boards. And I said, wait a minute, guys, that's my friend. He says, look under there. And I pick up a canvas and look in there, and they were like cigarettes in there, bodies. The truck was almost loaded with bodies, that we lost in there. I didn't think that there were that many, but there were quite a few. So that's the reason that a lot of times when somebody got wounded or something happened, that's the thing that got you, We decided, hey, they're not going to get me, or they're not going to get my friends. So that's what we were fighting for. Now, when we got to the concentration camps, it's a different story, because now you start really seeing what the people were going through. And you mentioned concentration camp Woodruff. When we got there, the first thing that I noticed, for miles and miles, you could, I don't know how many miles, but anyway, you could smell death, you could smell it, and something was going on. So anyway, we arrived at that place, we couldn't get in, and some of those guys in there, that the prisoners, they were making V signs with their finger, V shape. Some of them were almost naked. Some of them you could count the ribs on them. And we couldn't get in to help them at the time, And finally, one of the tanks came over and he rammed the gate, because they had two fences. They had a big fence on the outside, and then they had another fence on the inside. And in the middle, they had an electric wire fence. So you couldn't get in, So he jammed the gate. When he jammed the gate, the rifle companies, they got in, start searching for the guard and start searching everything. At the meantime, there was a guy there, a man there by the gate, and he had a can, and he had a little fire going. And I look at the can, and he had some potatoes there, the size of a quarter, a bunch of potatoes in the can. He was boiling potatoes. And he could speak Italian. He says, come over and eat some bush macaroni. And I said, are you a prisoner here? He says, yeah. He says, I've been here 5 years. He said, let me show you the place. So he took me around, and showed me some of the places. I'll tell you what, there were dead bodies everywhere. And that place stunk. Oh, man. There was a train there, and the box car was full of bodies. Some of them have been there for a long time, because you could see the evidence in the bodies, And then in the inside, you could see the ones that were alive, barely making it. Some of them were so sick they couldn't do anything. But they imagine to make the V sign for you, You talk about people giving you hugs. You got a lot of hugs there, but you don't want no hugs, because I tell you what, man, everything stunk in there. It was so bad. It's hard. That's hard to explain, because in the movie Saving Private Ryan, you can see the movie and you can see a lot of things there. But I tell you one thing, you don't get the odor. And boy, I stays with you. As I'm talking to you now, I can almost smell that. So anyway, some of the live people there, I don't know how they made it. If it would have been me, I think I would have killed myself. I don't know. But that time, the lieutenant comes over and he says, we got to pull out. I said, yeah, I think we better. I was glad to get out of there, because I'll tell you what, I look at the chambers where they were burning them, the bodies, and they couldn't burn them anymore. The bodies were in there so bad that you couldn't ignite them at all. And I heard later on, about a day or so after that, I heard that Patton and Eisenhower, both generals, were in there, and I understand that even Patton got sick over that. And Eisenhower made a remark, and I still have the remarks in my folder somewhere, where he said that he wanted every GI that was in Europe to see that place, so they would know what they were fighting for. Well, I tell you what, it made more than a believer in me. After that, you didn't care, anymore. But see, a lot of things you have to also I did, through my praying, and I think if it wouldn't have been for God, I don't know what I would have done. I even feel sorry for those SS troopers because sometimes the guard being there, and I sure as heck wouldn't want to be placed in a situation like that because Hitler had a hold on them. They either obey the orders or they get shot, they get killed. And to be a guard in a place like that, knowing all those things were going on, I don't see you would have to have your heart made out of rock, I guess. I couldn't even explain that. For a human to see some human going through that and not even can help them. Thank God that I learned how to pray because I tell you what, it was rough. It makes you appreciate life. It makes you appreciate other humans. And that's about the way we work because when we got replacements, a lot of the replacements that we got, a lot of times, some of them didn't even know how to disassemble a weapon. But I tell you what, I took my time to teach them. Every bit that I did. Not because, showing off or anything, compassion, that you get. It's hard. I don't see how, like I say, I don't know how a man like Hitler, would do anything like that to some other humans. But it's even going on today, you know that. Excuse me.
My name is Thomas Bram Harter. Well, I didn't exactly want to go in service. I was drafted.
Do you regret?
But no, I don't regret being in. I learned a world of experience. I was in the 357 Fighter Group stationed in England and Germany. I serviced the radios in the Mustang 351 Fighter Group. Radios had 3 different channels. One called when you're in distress, the other called for man to man. And that radio saved a lot of things. Because I've heard them on that radio said the last time we saw that pilot, he was going down in the ocean. Well, we got over in England, them linemen said them Jerry's gonna tear y'all up. They had us to dig trenches, but it wasn't long. They covered them up because our fighters took over. Our military vehicles was superior to all the rest of them. We got 6 battle stars for everything our planes flew. One day our group flew down 60 German planes, and they couldn't roll but 2 times, and they made some of them shot down 6 German planes. One of our pilots, the first plane he shot down was a jet. The jets couldn't stay up long, and our planes shot them down. Well, they had a buzz bomb, and it sounded like a T-Bar Ford coming. And when that thing went off, it blowed up everything. And they tried to fix it where it hit London. Because London is so big they couldn't miss it. I didn't exactly choose what I wanted, but they put me where they wanted me, and I performed my job as best I could. I got the good conduct medal, and I got 5 battle stars, 6 battle stars. I was in service 3 years and 7 days, and I was overseas 2 years. And I never had been off from home, and every time I'd get a letter, I'd cry. But after you got yourself, I could stay on. But I wanted to come home.
My name is Olive Eugenia Thomas Peele. I was in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. I entered in January of 1945, was discharged in April of 46 because I was married in Berlin. My wedding dress was made from a parachute, and I designed it, and a German tailor stitched it, and I didn't know, but marriage meant automatic discharge. I wouldn't have gotten married at that time had I known. Well, I had privy to what are today's computers. In 1945, there was a group of 3, and a crypt message was nothing but a line of garbled letters. You enter them in machine 1, then you go to the others. The keyboard on it is similar to a teletype, but it had more than one keyboard. It had a major one above, then another one below. You didn't think crypt when you left the classroom. You just didn't think it because it was that secret. In fact, it helped win. The messages, the codes, helped win the war. I was not kept with the crypt group too long. I was assigned to the Inspector General's department. When the 4 powers met in Germany to determine the government for Berlin after the war, the British, the French, the Russians, the Americans, I was the American secretary who sat behind our general as the meetings were held. I took dictation from interpreters. Everything seemed to fall into place to give an underprivileged person the additives that were needed to make a better education without having a certificate to say, here's where I graduated, and here's Country Girl. And it flabbergasts me until today that I was this blessed.
My name is Millard Garland. I was a gunner's mate 3rd, and I went in and I joined the Navy in 1947. Well, I was 17 and a friend of mine, and we decided to go join the Navy. But when he got there, he was colorblind, so he turned him down. They took me, though. So I just went ahead. Never had been on a ship before. Well, like I say, I was green as a gourd, and everything was new to me, strange to me. And I can remember the first week I was on that destroyer escort, I was chipping paint. And, well, I just went on, I made 3rd class gunner's mate on that ship. I was on destroyers and destroyer escorts. And we were in them, we left Pearl Harbor in 1948 to go have them atomic bomb test. And we was out there in a Weetalk for 6 months getting ready for it. We was looking for submarines that wasn't supposed to be there. My ship was a ASW ship, anti-submarine warfare ship. And I believe we had orders to sink any submarine that was caught in that whole area out there, because that was all top secret. They don't tell you anything. You couldn't have cameras with you, you couldn't have these radios with you. In fact, before we got there, they took them up from the whole crew. Wasn't allowed to have nothing like that. It was something new to all of us. That was, let's see, 6th, 7th, and 8th atomic bomb that had ever gone off. So it was new to all of us. And, well, I'm just glad I got to see it. But I can always remember I was standing next to the 5-inch gun on the forecastle. And I always remember where I was standing when they went off. I was standing in the same place for all three of them. And some of them on the ship officers, you know, they had these dark glasses that you could watch it through them, but most of the crew did not have any glasses, and we had to keep our eyes covered, but I could see the bones in my hand over my eyes. You could see the bones in it. It was that bright. And afterwards, that big mushroom cloud went up, and there's still a lot of light there too. A lot of that bright stuff. It was loud, loud, loud. Extremely loud. After you felt that force of it, you could feel the heat rolling over a few seconds. That heat rolled over us. And yeah, it was quite interesting. I'm just glad I got to see it. We just operated with submarines the rest of the time I was in Pearl Harbor and come back to San Diego. And I was transferred to a USS McCord, DD 534. And then we stayed out there a while and come back through Panama Canal, come around to the East Coast. And well, we operated around the East Coast here, went up to Halifax, Nova Scotia. You could be down here in that destroyer and you could see the water all around you, way up yonder. And then it'd come back up. You could see the whole ocean then. I was a gunner's mate, but I was an expert helmsman, so they'd put me on that wheel when it got real bad or something. Never got sick but one time in 5 years. And that one time was when one of them storms, one of them bad ones. But and the ice and the water would splash up on the ship. While we was up in there, it would freeze. Lifelines is that big around. In fact, they started us with clubs all around the ship, beating the ice off of the lifelines and all. And but I'll tell you one thing, it tore us up one time in one of them storms. tore one of our spray shields off running down the side of the ship. Tore one of our whale boats up. And that was a mean one. We was all a little bit scared then.
My name is John Skaug. I was in the U.S. Navy for 3 years, from 1953 to 1956. The military was really the last thing that I had any mind of doing. When I graduated from high school, I didn't have the foggiest idea what I wanted to do. Through a kind of an unfortunate circumstance, I ended up having to make a decision about either taking active duty with the Navy or getting drafted into the Army. And I decided that if I had to go into the service, I wanted to ride instead of walk. So I chose the Navy, and which it was a good choice. And my rank was a sonarman. When I was discharged, I was a sonarman, second-class petty officer. We had equipment, on the ship that was designed to search for underwater objects, such as a submarine. And our duties were basically to maintain and operate that equipment. And they would have every 6 months, I guess it was, they would have a drill where one of the submarines in our flotilla would sneak out at night. And they'd go out somewhere and submerge, and we had to go find them. And then once they were found, then we had to do the thing that we do, which was to locate ourselves directly over the submarine and then lower the equipment that that we had on board our ship to bring the people back up. There were 4 ships of our type, and one of them was stationed in San Diego, one was stationed in Hawaii, one was stationed in Japan, and then there was one that was in dry dock for repairs. And what we did was to go and exchange locations with the one that was in Japan, and then when we left Japan, we went to dry dock. There was 2 groups that were very, very tight. We had a ship's company of about 125 people, and probably a third of those were divers. And the divers were extremely close. And if you weren't a diver, you weren't a part of their group. And the rest of the crew were all fairly comfortable with each other, but the divers were especially tight, because when the divers were working, they were responsible really for each other's lives. And when you're diving 200 and 300 feet, if you're the guy that's down 200 or 300 feet, you want to be sure that the guy that's up at the top is doing what he's supposed to be doing and not goofing off or anything. And as a result, they really looked out for each other, and that helped the morale of the whole ship, I think. The ship was a working ship as opposed to a battleship, if you will. We had a job to do, and we didn't really have to worry too much about. We didn't really have, I think we had a 5-inch gun on the ship, and I think that was about it. every time they fired that gun, it ruined the radar. So they had to make sure that we didn't fire that too often. But so it was a good life for me. I mean, it was not a life of danger really, but I benefited very greatly from the time I was in.
My name is Robert Bostwick, and most people call me Bob. I was a corporal in the U.S. Army. I was in Korea in 1951. When the Korean War broke out in July of 1950, my buddy and I we had dropped out of high school and we were just milling around, dead-end jobs. So we decided to join the military. So we tried for the Navy, and for some reason, I don't know now why they wouldn't take us, but we joined the Army. And then he was sent to Germany, and I was sent to Korea. I took my basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and from there I was sent to Fort Lee, Virginia for 8 weeks of quartermaster training. Quartermaster is a lot of different categories in the quartermaster. They make sure the troops are supplied with the proper supplies. And in my case, I was trained to be a shower unit operator. I had to learn the basics of electricity, plumbing, and such as that. And when I first got to Korea, I was in charge of a shower unit operation. It entailed 2 big tents and the machines to pump the water and all the shower facilities to bring the troops in, and you had to supply them with clean clothes when they come off the front line. In that operation for roughly six weeks, and they decided that they needed me up on the front line. There was a spring offensive in 1951, and I was sent to the front lines. I was actually ready. I was young and foolish. I was only 18 years old, so I was ready for action. I had talked to a lot of people about, some of the soldiers that came back from Korea I seen in Fort Lee, Virginia, and I talked to them about Korea, and it didn't sound all that bad, but as it turned out, it was pretty bad. When I first got to the line, it wasn't too bad. I was a little town called Yeongdongpo, and we stayed there, and that was our place for the jumping off point. And after about a week or 10 days there, we were loaded onto trucks and taken up to the front lines, and that's when it started. It was not fun then. And I was a BAR man, that's a Browning automatic rifle, and I stayed at that position for about 3 weeks, and the machine gunner was killed, so they asked me if I would take the machine gun position, and I agreed to it. I was the machine gunner. I carried the tripod. Tripod is what the machine gun sits on. My assistant machine gunner, he actually carried the machine gun, and you had two ammo bearers that carried the several boxes of ammunition. And the machine gunner usually only gets a .45 caliber pistol. And I told the commanding officer, I said, you know, I would rather have a carbine as a sidearm. He says, well, I don't think you can handle a carbine and the .45 and the tripod. I says, I can handle it. I'd rather have the carbine. So he gave me the carbine and also the .45.
So you're pretty loaded down.
I was. So I felt more secure. And but I made it through many battles with carrying the carbine. I didn't know any of the men. When I transferred from the quartermaster to the infantry, I didn't know any of the guys on the front line. But you get to know them fast. You have to watch each other's back. We were moving up the hill, and the South Koreans, I guess it was, they had dug trenches around the mountain, and there was always a trench you could dive into. And we were taking this one hill in particular, and we knew that we were going to come under fire. This was very early evening. It was, well, just at dusk. And we thought we could make it up the hill before we would be hit, but they evidently seen us coming, and they opened fire on us. So we jumped in a foxhole, or one of these trenches, and worked they were just a long series of trenches, and you could go halfway around the mountain in one of these trenches. But you learn pretty quick how to keep your head down. There was a couple occasions we had to fix bayonets and do hand-to-hand combat. That's not fun. You have to be physically able to do that. And I guess I was. You sleep when you can. You know, if there's a lull in the fighting, that's when you find you a little hole, or maybe a place where it was bombed out, just crawl in that hole and try to sleep. Of course, you've always got somebody on watch. Well, when I was captured, actually, we were on outpost when we were overrun. This was in the middle of the night, and this was by the Chinese. The Chinese had entered the war at this time, and they just swarmed at us. Who knows how many hundreds of them there were, but we were just a couple of platoons up on this mountain on the outpost. We were halfway down the mountain, and we were just overrun, and we were blown out of the foxhole, my assistant machine gunner and myself. And there's barbed wire strands on down the hill, and I guess we tumbled through all this barbed wire and wound up in the bushes down below, what few bushes there were. And we were not quite enough, and the Chinese discovered us, and they separated us right away. But I knew he was, I could hear him. They were talking to him in Chinese, and he was answering the best he could, just as I was. I didn't know what they were saying, but you know, they'd crack me with the butt of their rifle a time or two, and I answered as best I could. He done the same, but he was led away, and I didn't hear any more from him until the prisoner exchange. We marched the rest of that night, and the next day we just hid wherever we could in a little old shack, because they didn't dare travel in the daytime because our own planes were still doing a lot of strafing and so forth. And the next night we started traveling again. I was wounded in the leg and the arm and so forth. I actually had 40 pieces of shrapnel in me. That's what they told me at the MASH hospital later. But not the next morning, but the following morning, I was able to catch my captors sleeping, and I seen my chance to get away, and I got away. It only took me, well, there again, I only traveled at night because the Chinese were swarming all over the place, and I was lucky enough to find a place to hide out in the daytime, and the next night I traveled, and the next morning I made it back to friendly lines. Oh, I was elated, and first thing they done was give me a shot of morphine and put me on a stretcher and take me back to the other side of the mountain, and a helicopter came in and flew me back to a MASH hospital. And from there, from the MASH hospital, I went by train back to Busan, and from there they flew me to Kobe, Japan, and I landed at Kobe, Japan the 21st of November, actually Thanksgiving Day. And they took me in and put me on the floor in the cafeteria. And I said, I don't think I want anything to eat. I just soon go upstairs and get all this shrapnel out of me. So I was there for a couple months before I went and rejoined my outfit. I guess that would be the one moment that I was wondering, well, am I going to be a prisoner, or are they just going to shoot me? Because they done a lot of that, you know, in the months prior to that. I'd seen it done time and time again. Sometimes you don't have time to take prisoners, and that's when they just shoot them on the spot. And there's a lot of times that I was wondering, I guess over those 2 days, I guess it was 2 days that I was captured, I guess I've done a lot of praying. And I still do today. I'm very thankful that I made it back, because I didn't do it by myself. I had help from the man upstairs.
The name is Herbert H. Hand. I was a lieutenant in the Air Force. Later I was a colonel in the Marine Corps. The Air Force sent me to MIT, and which is not the best electrical engineering school in South Carolina or in the United States, but in the world. And I only had 5 hours of college algebra. Yeah, and I had to work my proboscis off to get through there, but I did well, and I enjoyed electronics, and I was after I finished, I was sent to a SHORAN unit in Germany. SHORAN is short for short-range radar, and extremely accurate, up to about 300 miles, and very accurate over that. But well, I remember my first night, my first early morning in Germany, because I had to go to work very early in the morning. But I saw all these lights going down the street, and I didn't have any idea what in the world they were. Turned out they were Germans on bicycles going to work. That's how they got to work, because they didn't have any cars. And most of the buildings were bombed out in the cities in which I lived, and my wife and I lived. And Germany was really in shambles at that time, but they were rebuilding. It was pretty obvious that they were going to do it. Very hard-working people. But the Germans were pretty friendly. I mean, I was stationed in an area in North Germany, which is as flat as a pool table. And at that time, President Eisenhower had, well, he of course knew what the situation was in Europe. And he knew the Russians had a large number of tanks that they would like to unleash on the West. He knew there was no way our troops could fight those tanks. They had, our intelligence reported that they had over 1,000 tanks and maybe as many as 3,000. And our job was to unleash nuclear weapons from the F-86s on the Russian tanks if they decided to use those. And we had several radar units, SHORAN units in West Germany, and we could either work in single or in tandem. And if the single were very accurate, in tandem they were extremely accurate. I mean, being able to drop a bomb in very close proximity to the target. And since we knew that our aircraft were equipped with nuclear weapons, we didn't have to get too close. And when we had an alert, an exercise, we never knew whether it was real or whether it was practice. We were jammed almost all the time, and so at that time we could not distinguish between being jammed and whether it was a real attack, but we had to rely on our intelligence groups to tell us that. And they were very good about that. All of my men were very competent with firearms. We had an evacuation program in the event there was an attack. And our big problem was getting dependents out. And that was one of my constant worries, is how we had quite a few dependents. Plus the fact that there were quite a few men living with their German girlfriends and who probably wanted to go with us, but we never knew whether we'd be able to make it out or not. But because we had two major rivers to cross, and but that was always a concern. And luckily, I had some pretty good top kick sergeants that knew what in the world was going on. But those sort of things are stressful. I didn't get an ulcer, but I thought about it. And all my men had 16 men on the site. They were all tough, and had some grizzled old veterans and some young guys like me. And but it's stressful to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but we lived there. That's the way we lived. And but and I was glad to do it. it was sort of fun when you're young and don't know any better.
Richard M. Kim, Commander, U.S. Navy, 21 years. I come from a military background. My dad was a West Point graduate. And the Korean War was just over, and I couldn't get a job because the draft was still on. And what made me decide to go in the Navy was a fraternity brother of mine who was a year ahead of me came back one day to visit the fraternity, and he was driving a convertible, a 56 Chevy convertible with a top down. And he had these gold bars. And so I said to him, "Where'd you get those gold bars?" Because I wasn't getting a job because I didn't meet the draft. I still had the draft over my head. So he said there was a student union was having interviews for people to join the service. And so I ran up to the student union and I got this master chief. And I said, "I'd like to join the Navy." He said, "Okay." He said, "Do you have those gold bars?" And he said, "Yeah, you got the gold bars. You want to go to the officer training?" And I said, "Yes, I'd like to do that." And then I said to him, now imagine how stupid this was. I said, what do I have to do to stay off a ship? He said, "Do you like to fly?" I said, "I love flying." He said, "Have you ever made models?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've made a lot of models." Well, I wasn't stupid because, in fact, I'd never seen a plane in my life. Never been to an airport. Anyways, I ended up going into the Navy as a pilot, pilot training, which was about a very intensive training for 6 months with a 4-year obligation. And guess what happened? Then I got my wings out to sea. I had never flown, as I told you, I'd never even seen an airport, and I came down in an Electra, a golden Electra, at Eastern Airlines, and dropped us in Pensacola. And I had just come off for 3 weeks. I graduated from UConn, came off for 3 weeks honeymoon. And I ended up in a bunk. We landed in Pensacola, and they picked us up and took us a van out to the air station. And then it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, hot as you can believe. And they said, "Get in that bunk room," some staff sergeant told me. It was 2 in the morning. And I climbed up into this bunk, and I said, "Dear Lord, what have I done to my life?" And but the biggest event was when I had soloed. I just flew. I didn't have the feeling. But when we got into advanced training with gunnery and rockets and bombs, I fell in love with flying. I was a benefit of good instructors that told you how to be easy, and I turned to love it. I just loved flying on a carrier. It's you only can dream of it. And I was a lucky guy, and I didn't realize it until later on in my life.
This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
He gave a speech that night, and we were watching on TV, and about an hour after the speech was over, the phone rang. He said, "Pack your bags." And what we did is we went and said goodbye, loaded our aircraft, and we were off to Cuba.
The United States answer to what Adlai Stevenson termed Soviet blackmail in Cuba was a quarantine of all offensive weapons being shipped from Russia to that island fortress. The U.S. threw up a steel fence, prepared to stop any vessel carrying materials of war.
We put up, my squadron put up the block for Cuba, and we go over and low fly them and take pictures of their decks. It was kind of neat.
Is there a moment that kind of defined or reshaped your outlook on life in the military?
In a moment, I think the comradeship and watching people get killed and you still have to do your duty. Especially if you go off and the night recovery comes in and there's two pilots missing and they got you up on the catapult and when you go off and you're thinking you just have to do it. And you realize what people are all about, that all people are equal. Because if I thought I was better than that brown shirt, he'd text me over the side. Of course he wouldn't do that. And that's the biggest thing I got out of the military, how people take care of each other. And we lost a little of it in Vietnam, but it's back now.
I didn't have a choice, honestly. When I went in the service, I was 23 years old. I had graduated from college, and quite frankly, in 1967, Vietnam had only become a talked about issue only in the couple of years before that. I was married, and I knew that, you know, something might happen, but when I graduated, I went to work, and I was with the company I was with for 2 months, and then I got my draft notice. Went down and passed the physical with flying colors, and of course, everybody passed the physical, and was told I had about 2 months to get ready.
It's something I always want to do ever since I was a little boy. I always wanted to be a soldier. When I was a little fella, I would be walking down the sidewalk carrying a wooden rifle, and my daddy would ask me, say, "Boy, where are you going?" And I'd say, "I'm going to kill Hitler."
We'd all gotten our draft numbers, and I had a fairly low number, but I had a college deferment. And it was kind of like, well, when you get out, you're going to have to go, eventually probably go anyway. And I had my best friend, he decided to, join the Air Force. And he talked me into it. I said, well, let's go join the Air Force together. And then, and two, I think GI Bill, that was another thing, to help pay for college. And so he and I, we ran off to join the Air Force together, and there we go.
When I was out of high school, I knew that I would be drafted. It was just a matter of time, and it wasn't long after I left high school till I got my notice from Uncle Sam. And the way the letter read, you'd have thought I was going to be proud to get it, but at that time I really wasn't. I was just out of high school, and it was time to enjoy life, and I had no ties really, so I thought that's going to put a crimp in my style. But the way I was raised, I didn't have the option of going to Canada or anything like that. If you got the call, you were no better than the next man. You answered the call. And in basic, the first thing they want to do is break you down so they can bring you back. And in their way of life, being that if somebody speaks, you jump. You don't question. And when you get in a combat situation, this is very necessary. If you get a command, you move now. You don't say, "But why?" or "I don't feel like it." You get up and you move. And basic training basically is to get you into condition and physically, and to teach you when you hear a command, you move.
I was a weapons instructor in the weapons department, small arms, M14, BAR. You might not remember or know about the BAR, but it was a real good weapon. I taught the M14A1, which is a full automatic version of the M14 with bipod blades. I taught the 45. I've even taught the bazooka. So just about everything the Army's got to shoot, I taught it. The M16s malfunctioned a lot because if you got them dirty, they would jam. You had to constantly clean them. And a lot of good soldiers died because of the fault of the malfunction on the M16. But I was on a committee at Fort Benning to evaluate the M16. We wrote up a report and said this weapon is not ready for combat. Well, they sent it anyway. They had to harden the chamber and make sure the gas ports were manufactured in such a way that they were easy to clean. And it made the weapon finally reliable. But to tell you the truth, when I got to Vietnam, they wanted to issue me an M16. I said, no, thank you. I found me a friend that I was on the weapons committee with at Fort Benning. He was in charge of an intelligence unit that did intelligence on captured BC weapons. And I remembered that the French were in Vietnam, so I knew there must be a lot of MP-40 submachine guns. I went downtown with him to the White House and got a German 9mm MP-40 submachine gun. That's what I carried.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I got my ammo off the Australians. You could take a quarter liquor down there and get a Jeep trailer full of ammo. Orders came down, and I went to go to Vietnam. So, like any good soldier, you know, I packed up my ditty bag and went to Vietnam. I wasn't scared. I guess you might say I just sort of took it in stride. Maybe a little bit of excitement and maybe a touch of apprehension. But more or less, I was a soldier. I knew that's what I was supposed to do, so I did it. Well, I went to the 90th. I landed at Benoit Airfield, and I went to the 90th Replacement Detachment, and the 246 PSYOP Detachment sent two guys down to interview me, and I guess they were satisfied with what they saw and what I said. They took me into the 246 PSYOP, and I became a PSYOP warrior, as they call us. They call us the bullshit bombers, because we did all kinds of propaganda leaflets and flew around Vietnam and dropped them, trying to get the Vietnamese to join the Chu Hoi program. That's where they would come in to the U.S. side and they would take care of the wounds, and in some cases they'd fix their teeth too. So, and I did my job best I could.
My first reaction, I'll never forget it as long as I live. There's certain things about Vietnam and things that you'll never forget, like smells, going to the beach. I mean, I get that, you know, the beaches, the smell down there, the swampy smell, kind of, whatever you call it. Plane landed, I got off the tarmac, and I'm walking across. You see other guys, they're leaving, you know, and you look at these guys and think, man, that guy must be 30-something years old. He ain't but 20, you know. I look terrible. And look across the tarmac over there and you see them loading metal coffins in the back of planes. You know, they come out there with a truck out of hole, rows of them, and you're walking off and you see that and you're like, and you know that's bodies. And then you see these guys leaving and they got the looks on their faces like, you know, they just walked out of hell. So you really, then it starts to hit you like, man, I'm in, you know, what am I into here? And I think the worst, the loneliest, most homesick feeling I ever had in my life, the most empty feeling ever in my whole life, was I get there and they check your papers and do all this stuff. And then they say, okay, you got this compound area you go to over here and wait, because my flight to Phuket was next day to catch a C-130 to fly up to Phuket. And they said, you got barracks, just find you a place to rack out, and if you can, good luck finding you some food somewhere or whatever. And it was like a fenced-in compound area where you had to stay there. You know, you couldn't wander around, go downtown or nothing like that. Later, as it got dark, and I went into the barracks, walked in, the lights out, and you don't turn the lights on for anything because somebody throws something at you, you know. And I lay there in that bunk that night, didn't know a soul there and all. And it was just very empty feeling, you know. And you're like, that's when you get real homesick, and you wonder, like, what have I got myself into? And yeah, that was the most, I guess, feeling of despair I've had in my whole life. You know, I had experience up to that point in my life, and it was, like saying, being unsure, not knowing. And then, then once I left there and then got up to Phuket, I got there and running into some guys I'd trained with and some guys I knew. And, you know, like a band of brothers, I mean, it's true. You're there to support one another. And it was good to see these guys. You know, man. And then some of the despair leaves you, and then you start feeling a little bit better, you know, and everything. But it was a long year. They had tried before I'd gotten there, and around 67, 68, the Air Force decided, well, they had a 26-mile around the perimeter out. That was our area there of coverage. So we had to patrol that whole area, and what we call getting in the bush, out in the bush patrols. So we had our own teams, you know, bush teams that you were assigned, and the way we did Air Force, we rotated out. We didn't keep you in the bush forever. You'd do perimeter guard duty, tower, bunkers, etc. For, you know, a week or two. Then you might be on a quickie team, quick reaction team, that was, if you were getting hit like one particular part of the base, then the quickie team would go out there and set up. You'd have a 50 caliber on there, 60-man, M174 grenade launchers, etc., 90 millimeter. etc., you know, would be there on the team, and the team would be extra fire support to back you up. And we'd do that for a while. Then we had a Hill 151, observation hill. It was next to the base there, and it's a big, tall hill, and it just had a little area on the very top of it. And it had a bunker in the ground, you know, and then we had a trench. And we had a 60 was set up on this end of the trench here, on the platform, and another 60 on the top. And our job, 4-man observation team, was to look over what we call the backside of it, VC Valley, and then the mountains. And at night, you'd sit there and call in movements. You'd see the Viet Cong be moving weapons in. I mean, they used lanterns. You'd see all these strings of lanterns just way down there. You call that in, and my best experience was watch a B-52 arc-light strike. They called it. They called us up on radio and said, boys, get ready tonight. Said, you're going to have a good time. What's that? Said, pop your popcorn, kick back, and enjoy the show. Have a B-52 arc-light strike. I said, hey, okay, never seen one of those. That'd be cool. And man, all of a sudden, you didn't hear anything. You just started bombs falling. And it started on this end of the valley, went all the way through that entire valley, and everywhere you looked, bombs were going off, and it was at night. I mean, I'm talking probably a mile across, you know, like 4 or 5 miles down. And I mean, you're like, there's nothing could live through that. I mean, you're always scared, you know, you're always afraid. And sometimes at the time then, you come to a point, at first you think, well, I'm invincible. Nothing's going to happen to me. Until you get into a firefight, rocket attack, something like that. And then you're like, holy moly, this thing's for real. And then when it happens, you're afraid, but once it starts, then the fear kind of leaves, adrenaline kicks in, and then it's all about the business of trying to stay alive, you know. And I think it's the thought of combat is what scares you.
We flew over, the boys I went over with, and we were, I think, about 21, 22 hours in the air getting there. And as we landed in Vietnam, they opened the doors, and the heat hit us. And an old Carolina boy, that heat, it had to be well over 100 degrees that day, and that heat hit us, it just took our breath. Well, we stepped off the plane out onto the runway there, and I'm thinking, aren't we in a war? Why are we standing out here in the open? I was expecting to run for a bunker, but we were in a fairly secure area, Benoit Air Force at that time, airport, and walked over, and the heat was just unbearable. It was just major meltdown right at that time. And from there we were placed in a holding camp till we, I guess, got our orders to which outfit we were going in as replacements. And we pulled minor details and stuff like that while we were in the placement camp. We was only there a few days and was put on a truck, open deuce and a half. They handed us a rifle, a flak jacket, and a steel pot for our head. And we hit the road up through Saigon, up Highway 1, headed to Cu Chi. I guess the first time I left Cu Chi, it was just an overnighter. We went on a night ambush patrol out of Cu Chi out into the rubber trees and walked out and didn't hit anything. We didn't have anything, but I guarantee you there wasn't any problem staying awake. We went out and waiting for something to happen, but think, man, I wish I could see if anything was a-coming. And well, maybe if I can't see them, they can't see me. And really, we were going out on an ambush patrol in hopes, I guess, of ambushing the enemy out there. And me being green in country, I was going out on ambush patrol hoping we didn't find any enemy out there. You know, I was kind of thinking the first time I experienced this, I'd like for it to be daylight so I could see what was a-coming. But it was not comfortable down in the pit of your stomach. You had, if you didn't have fear, something was wrong with you. In my situation, I spent a lot of time in the field. A lot of time we were sleeping out on the ground, this, that, and the other. In my mind, I knew if we pulled mortars and rockets at night, if I was flat on the ground, the best place to be is in a foxhole. But if I'm flat on the ground, it almost takes a direct hit to get me. And if you're in a foxhole, a direct hit's going to get you anyway. Don't matter if you're in a hole. So in my mind, I knew the safest place to be was flat on that ground. So there's been several times that we pulled mortars at night and I'd sleep through it. Somebody come trying to tiptoe by me, I'd be wide awake. Because in my mind, I knew if they slipped up on me, my throat could be cut. But that mortar round exploding wouldn't wake me up. There's been more than once I've had a guy crawl over to me and say, "Sarge, you need to get in the hole, we're being mortared." And I'd listen, I said, "I don't hear anything." He said, "Well, it's quit now." "Well, why did you wake me?" I'm doing fine. Of all the time I spent walking point in Vietnam, I spent a lot of time on point as a point man. I, knock on wood, was lucky that I never left a booby trap for somebody else to find. I had a sixth sense that if I came in, you know, the hair sort of stands up on the back of your neck. You know it's time to start looking. And I heard other point men laugh and brag that, man, I was lucky. I missed that booby trap. Third guy back got it. And I'm thinking, no, you should have found that booby trap. The third guy back shouldn't have got it. It never gets easy. and especially if it's somebody you know. It's if it's somebody in another company you really don't know, it don't hit you as hard. But if it's one of your guys, especially one of your squad that you've been living with and spend nights in the foxhole with, then it really hurts. And I lost one real close friend, and I guess I was in a daze for probably 2 days. Just, I was walking, but it was, Pete was gone. What could I do, you know? And it was in an ambush. Got him. It's like the show on TV, The Band of Brothers. You get tight in a way you don't want to, because you know there's a chance you're going to lose him. But in another way, you know, you're not over there. When you're in combat, you're not thinking about defending South Vietnam. You're not thinking about defeating communism. You're thinking about looking after your buddy here beside you. You're covering him. Hopefully he's covering your back. And the bravery comes from looking after your buddy. That's all you're thinking about. You're taking care of each other. And until that actual combat situation's over, that's all that's on your mind. You're looking after each other.
I'll never forget, though, the first night I was in country. We were in Long Binh. It was in September of 1968, and we got hit with rockets all around Long Binh, which is a big military base there. And I can remember being woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning, all of us that were in that group, and told to go over to the hospital so they could draw blood. And it was so shocking to fly on a plane for 30 hours and then arrive in a hostile zone. You're just not prepared for it. The first time I experienced being in a combat situation, I would say the first major event, there were several, but the first major event was really, I'd probably been there a couple of months. We'd had sporadic instances of running into enemy, finding small base camps and doing things like that. But we ran into 2 North Vietnamese divisions, divisions, camped just over the border from Vietnam. At the time we really did not know, but the chopper was kind of guiding us from above, and we went into a smoke-filled area, and we ran right into a huge number of enemy soldiers. And we fought all day long. And I was numb, that's all I can tell you. It was the fastest 10 or 11 hours I've ever been through. There were bodies everywhere. Fortunately, there weren't too many Americans, or too many out of our unit. But we were just, it was wild. I think if anything, you get maybe a little numb, and because you go through periods where things are happening, and then you go through periods of time where you're searching, or on S&D missions, search and destroy, and you're looking and you're investigating. It wasn't like you were fighting every day, you weren't. But a lot of times there was always living with the threat of it. You heard noises that you never heard before. You could hear a leaf fall, for example. I mean, you're just so sensitive to hearing things. You know, when I was wounded, And I don't even remember. I just remember looking down when I was grabbing an ammo can, and all I could see was red blood. My arm still worked, and I still was able to do what I needed to do. And I was hit by what they call a rocket-propelled grenade fragment that came through and pierced, put metal all in my arm. My flak jacket probably saved my life, but I remember the burning. I don't remember anything else. You know, one of the things I learned is that you don't know when you're going to die. You don't know how you're going to die. It's enhanced to a great degree when you put yourself in a combat situation or you're put into one, and you have no control over where the next projectile is going to go and where it's not going to go. It is all in God's hands. And I don't mean that He sends bullets to kill you. I just know that those things do happen. The hardest thing was seeing young kids that never really, just out of high school. That's tough. But usually they are taken off the battlefield medevac pretty quickly, so I didn't really feel like I got time to sit around and mourn over that at that moment. It's later that when you're in action, things happen so fast. I had somebody tell me many years ago after I had come back from the service that knew me before and knew me after, and I was impressed by what he said, in that he said I was a very different, more mature person. And he only saw a glimpse of my life at one point and a glimpse of my life at that point. But the things that you carry back from being in the service or being in combat are things that are way deep inside, and you have to deal with them. And so for a lot of years I had a lot of pain from the feeling of being rejected by my peers, so to speak, and that's gone away a good bit, because now I see how they're treated now, and it's a lot better. I mean, you know, a lot better.
What helped you get through that? God and family?
Absolutely. I had a lot of rough times. I had a lot of good times, but I had some rough times personally. And about 20 years ago, I finally sort of hit the wall in respect to that in my own personal life. And that's when I made the decision, and I guess you'd call it being born again, new creature in Christ. And it saved me. It saved my life. Gave me a new attitude and a new way of looking at life, and how I appreciate it so much more than before. You take it for granted when you're younger, and then when you get a little older, you have some memories to hang on to.
I came back from Vietnam. I'd been over 12 months, eating sea rations for 12 months, sleeping in rice paddies, fighting the red ants and the mosquitoes, as well as the enemy. I looked down off the Pacific Ocean and saw the California coastline coming, and I'm ready to celebrate. Buddy, I am home. That plane landed. We got off the plane. That's back when you got off on the tarmac and walked to the terminal. They were a group of people along the fence shouting, and I said, man, they're glad to see us. I got a little closer and realized, hey, I don't like the sound of this. And I turned to the guy behind me and I said, man, there's somebody on this flight that must be a bad hombre. They don't like him. As we come on around, realized it was all of us. And they were screaming at us. We were monsters. We were baby killers. And I'm thinking, why? And I was in disbelief. Why are these people talking to us this way? What's going on? What's happened? And when we got home and started watching television, it didn't take long to find out.
We got off playing and there's people throwing marbles at us and eggs and dog poop, you know, all kinds of stuff, screaming, hollering at us. And it wasn't a warm welcome. And you were so glad to be back. You was like, you know, I'm back in the world. I mean, you know, I made it. You know, I made it. I'm alive. And then to come back to that, it was pretty bad. And I think a lot of us just got, like myself, I just had a sour taste in my mouth for the people. Not so much Vietnam and the guys over there. You know, I still, you know, defended them and the purpose, because some of the things we did, it was great. Some of the atrocities we saw were inflicted by Viet Cong, the NVA, not our troops, but them. And they did some things to these people that was just horrendous.
You know, in Vietnam, we lost 52,000. And you have to remember, we were rotating several 100,000 men in and out of there every year or two. At the height of it, we had almost 500,000 soldiers there. And a lot of them came home wounded. A lot of them were very young. And a lot of them didn't make it after they got home, suffered tremendously. And I think part of that was we didn't love them enough.
My name is Thomas Smith. I was in active duty 3 years and 6-year reserve, and I was in the Navy, and I was a petty officer, third class, and a machinist mate. I thought I'd learn more in the Navy, do more things. You know, I guess I went in at that time to get my life straight. You know, I thought, what's the best way to do it? You know, I worked with you know, I guess what we called a salvage Navy. I was more support for divers. I was an engineman at that time, and I worked on all the engines for all the boats that went out. I was in the last year that they had, you remember the old hard brass or copper, whatever it was?
The
big heavy duty ones?
Yeah.
I was in the last year they used them. And the divers would explain to me how they were kind of safer in a way, because if something happened to the hose, they had 12 minutes of air still. The things they got now goes right across the neck. So that's 2 minutes and you're dead. You know, so they kind of liked it. As far as air-wise, they liked the other ones better. They were heavy as heck. Well, different things. There's a lot of planes that go down in the ocean. Matter of fact, I came back from, well, I went for my grandfather's funeral. And the day before I came back, they had one of the bowl games in the Aloha Stadium. And they were going to have parachuters. The plane didn't make it. It went down right there at the Arizona Memorial. And our unit had to clean up the mess, you know. Lucky, again, I was a day late coming in, you know. But that, that's, going down, picking up the bodies, getting the old black box out of airplanes, and all that stuff was what they were in charge of. We were more of like also a teaching unit. There were ships around us that were salvage ships, and we would teach. We had an LCM boat, which was a landing craft, and we'd hook it up to I think it was a net layer, a World War II net layer, and we'd take it out, go up and beach it, and then fill it up with water. And then we would, part of the training of them, for them ships to come out, suck out the water and pull it off. Also, the unit was in charge of the firefighting, teaching firefighting, where ships up in Pearl Harbor, when they would tore some down, they would bring all their wood and they throw it on the ship. Well, we'd take the ship about 2 miles out and start it on fire. Then these ships would have to go up and put out the fire, which was a pretty neat thing to, be involved with. There's some boats that also had our same kind of divers that were right next to where we were. And we did a lot of maybe some teaching and some support for these people. And even coming to me a lot on the boats because of, I had 5 35-foot workboats to work on and one 70-foot land LCM. And everybody would come to me to ask for, hey, how do you fix this? How do you fix that? Made me feel big for a while.
I'm Josh Littlefield. I'm a Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force, and I've been in 17 years. I joined the service when I was 19 years old. Both my grandfathers were in the service, and I think my grandfathers before them was in the service. I know I have some relatives who fought in the Civil War, had relatives that fought in World War II, and then my dad was in the Army for 2 years, and so at 19 years old I joined the service, and I think it's a long tradition. After September 11th, we knew that we would probably be going to war pretty soon, and without sounding too harsh, we're kind of looking forward to going to war. Not that war is a good thing, but this was a chance for us to use our training to bring the terrorists that attacked us that day to justice, and we were all looking forward to it. And so when I got notice that I was going to deploy into combat in early 2002, then I was excited and I was ready to go serve my country in the training that they've given me. My job's kind of unique in the Air Force. The Air Force isn't really a frontline force, but my job is a frontline force. I look for high value targets, high payoff targets, and call in airstrikes on those targets. And so I'm boots on the ground, on the battlefield, a lot of times right up on the front line with the United States Army, and I call in airstrikes when we need the Air Force to come over and drop a big bullet. So when you go to combat, you want to fight for your country, but when it all falls apart and the bullets start coming at you, you're not doing it for your country anymore. You're doing it for the guy next to you, and so the guy next to you becomes very important. He depends on you, and you depend on him, and you wind up fighting for each other until you've gained control. I've lost a couple friends in combat. I think about them a lot. Some of them were fairly close friends, and we do a lot of push-ups in the military, and so these friends of mine, I never forget them, because at the end of our push-up sessions, we always do push-ups for them too. So we don't let their memory fade. I can only speak for myself with getting used to combat, and I can tell you that yes, you do get used to it, or at least I do. During the invasion of Iraq, the fighting was nonstop when we invaded that country, and it gets to the point where I didn't think about anything else, and so except for the bad guys and for trying to make it another day, and so that kind of became a way of life for the months that I was there. So yeah, I got used to that every day, expecting to be in combat. I am a Christian, and I have a strong faith in God. I was raised up in a Christian home, and then I made a decision to follow the Lord as a young man. So my prayer life, it really grows in combat, as you can imagine. Usually they say, an old joke is, there's no atheist in a foxhole. So my faith in the Lord really grew in combat. I spent more time in prayer. I spent more time in His Word, and that really got me through. I believe that being a Christian does make you a better soldier, airman, sailor, Marine. The reason I believe that is because there is a higher power, and without a doubt, the Lord is on the throne. And my faith in the Lord gives me peace, and it gives me comfort no matter what I'm doing, because I honestly believe that the Lord is sovereign, and He will take care of me no matter what. The Lord says over and over and over in His Word, fear not. And so I carry His words with me, fear not. Yeah, it was amazing going into Baghdad and to other places of Iraq and seeing where Saddam and his family and his top personnel lived, and how they lived, and how lavish they lived, and the luxury that they lived in with those palaces and the playgrounds that they had, but then the people of the country were just living in poverty and filth and nastiness. And it's when people complain about going into Iraq, I'll tell you, the smiles on the people's faces when we overthrew that army was unreal, and the thank yous that we got from those people was unreal, because we tore down the dictatorship there and we gave those people freedom. Now, it didn't come cheap. There was a lot of bloodshed, but we gave those people freedom, and I can tell you firsthand, they were happy to get it. So coming home from combat's sometimes it's a little tough. It's of course you're overwhelmed with joy. Just being back in the United States, the greatest country in the world, is a joyful thing. Seeing your family that you hadn't seen in so long fills your heart full of joy. But it's also tough in that the people you've been around for the past however many months you were deployed, and the guys you were fighting beside, and the guys you were taking care of, and the guys that was taking care of you, well, they're not around. You're not seeing them every day like you did for the past however many months you were deployed, which is a blessing in itself, but it's also a big adjustment. You also are flooded with the things that you take for granted, like running water and a roof over your head. A lot of those things we didn't have when I was deployed. A lot of times at night, wherever we were, we'd lay down in the dirt and we'd sleep, and then we'd get up and move out the next morning. And so it takes a little adjustment to get back to normal.
Know your maker. Believe in what God can do for you. And the young kids I saw over there, and I would say 80% of the soldiers that I saw in Vietnam that were over there were probably 18 and 19 years old. They really hadn't had a chance to make too many decisions. And I believe in my own heart they were taken care of if they didn't get back. But you believe in God when you're in combat. When you go over into a war zone, you believe. There has to be something to go to beyond just what's getting ready to happen. And I would say get right, know your Lord, and pray.
Folks, you veterans, especially today, are all volunteer. They're going in, they're choosing, they've made the choice to go. They are there defending the enemy at a point that is not on our border. Till the World Trade Center was hit, we never knew combat on our border as far as a foreign country. These folks are doing a fantastic job. They need your respect, and they need to be treated with respect and decency when they come home. And to the most part, our country, that's what they're getting, to the most part.
Well, I have a deep respect, and I hold our veterans up, the veterans before me and the veterans that will come after me. And I know today is different times. I know the Vietnam vets had a hard time when they came back with the way their country treated them. Today is a different time. Veterans, we get treated pretty well in general by the public, and so my hat goes off, and I say thank you to America for your support and the way you treat your veterans.
Well, to the current servicemen and women, I really thank them very much for their sacrifice and for their service to our country. I really do appreciate it.
You have to, first of all, okay, you have to be patient, because that's one of the things that kind of works on you when you're in the battlefield. And like I said, this war is a whole lot different than World War II, so you have to be very careful. And one thing, I don't know if they can do it or not, but it's pray to God for help, because I tell you what, He can help them. He can help them. Anyway, that's what I would tell them, and I would encourage them to just be patient, because everything has a beginning and everything has an end.